Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about 30K as we get into the Council of Nikaea, or Nicaea. I'm going to say Nikaea. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And of course, don't forget to share these videos with your friends. It really helps out the channel when you do that. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Council of Nikaea. The Council of Nikaea was a great imperial conclave called by the Emperor of Mankind during the early 31st millennia on the world of Nikaea in the midst of the Great Crusade that was intended to determine whether or not the use of psychic sorcery presented a blessing or a grave danger to mankind. There was an increasing concern as the Great Crusade progressed about the use of psychic abilities. The Emperor was of course the most powerful human psyker to have ever lived, but he was deeply ambivalent about the spread of the mutant psyker genes through more and more of the human population, as he rightfully believed that most of mankind was not yet evolved enough, either physically or spiritually, to truly control the great powers of the warp or avoid the temptations offered by its more malevolent denizens. More and more often, during the process of the imperial conquest of the galaxy, the Imperial Army and the Space Marines would make planetfall, only to find the populace were enthralled to a mysterious power or unnatural mystic, the so-called sorcerers. These people were essentially members of chaos cults who would resist the forces of the Emperor with sorcerous powers granted to them by the demonic entities of the warp. These powers were also very akin to those used by the Thousand Sons Legion of the Primarch Magnus the Red. The Thousand Sons had come under criticisms for their use of sorcery by the Primarch Mortarion of the Death Guard Legion, who knew by his own personal experience with sorcerers on his homeworld of Barbarous the dangers to be found in anything spawned from the warp. And also Lemanrus of the Space Wolf Legion, for whom any battle fought through sleight of hand, clever deceit, or any trick other than straightforward physical combat was by definition dishonorable. Russ found the Thousand Sons' use of sorcery distasteful in the extreme, and it was Russ who had fought the hardest for the Imperium to ban the use of psychic powers, after his own experiences during several campaigns of the Great Crusade, where his Space Wolves had fought beside the Thousand Sons. The schism grew so great that it threatened the very stability of the developing Imperium, and so the Emperor himself had called for the Imperial Conclave to resolve the issue once and for all. Unlike his brother Primarchs, Magnus the Red saw the potential in exploiting the powers of the psychically talented Astartes, and he had been instrumental in the development of the Space Marines Corps of Librarians. In some of the Astarte legions, the psychic mutation was relatively common, and it was felt by some of the Primarchs that such individuals should be allowed to continue to use their innate psychic abilities for the benefit of the Legion. This would allow these gifted battle brothers to be of use to their legion without presenting any danger to their fellows or the civilians of the Imperium. Magnus and a number of other Primarchs created a program for the training and development of Psyker Astartes that supplemented the traditional process for creating a new Space Marine. The Emperor was asked to approve of the recruitment of these Psykers into the ranks of those legions who wished to make use of them, and he sanctioned these first experiments as a means of controlling the spontaneous outbreaks of psychic mutation within the ranks of the legions. The Librarians quickly proved to be loyal and effective warriors, and soon gained acceptance by the Emperor and the Primarchs for their presence on the battlefield. The Librarians became a powerful addition to the ranks of the Space Marine legions. However, there were those Primarchs who raised their voices in dissent, arguing amongst themselves and with the Emperor that the Librarians should not be permitted within the ranks of the Astartes. Some desired to expand their legions librarius and recruit even more librarians into their ranks, while other Primarchs passionately opposed the entire notion of librarians and felt that they should be expunged from their ranks altogether. Primarchs such as Lemanrus felt that the librarians were no better than witches. Korax and Rogaldorn also refused to commit their legions to fight alongside other legions that made use of librarians. Mortarion in particular accused his brother Magnus of using the forbidden art of sorcery. Dismayed at the accusation leveled against Magnus and the friction the issue was causing amongst his Primarchs, the Emperor was also concerned about the librarians and the dangers they presented to the Great Crusade, when he was no longer fighting directly alongside his Space Marine legions. Before departing for Terra to begin his secret Imperial Webway project, he summoned the Primarchs and all other major Imperial leaders to a War Council summit on the world of Nikaea to address the Librarian crisis. Both sides of the debate over the use of psychic abilities arrived at the world of Nikaea, determined to present their views, with the Emperor as the arbiter, enthroned above the dais in an ancient amphitheater that sealed tens of thousands, where the conclave was held. On one side of the question were the witch hunters, like the Sisters of Silence, who presented their case by reciting a litany of the human sufferings inflicted upon the Emperor's own subjects by sorcerers enslaved by what would later be recognized during the Horus Heresy as chaos, of gibbering mutants who had lost their humanity, and of cults and power-hungry men who turned their psychic gifts to dark purposes. All present were also made aware of the terrible damage that had been done by uncontrolled and demon-possessed psychers during the early days of the Age of Strife. On the other side was a powerful advocate of the continued use of sorcery, the Primarch Magnus the Red. His very presence frightened many, but he began to speak with a great charisma that only a Primarch could wield. His argument that no knowledge was tainted in and of itself, and no pursuit of the knowledge was ever wrong so long as the seeker of the truth was the master of what he learned rather than his pawn. He spoke with finality that his 1,000 sons Astartes had mastered their knowledge of sorcery, and that there was no knowledge too labyrinthian for them to grasp, or that they could not master to serve mankind rather than enslave it. Magnus called to the Emperor not to ban the use of psychic abilities, but to contribute to further research into their usage so that they might be harnessed more fully for the betterment of humanity and the Imperium. Magnus had spoken passionately with great power, and the council became even more divided. While they had strong arguments in their favor to justify anti-psychic positions, the witch hunters could not effectively match Magnus's persuasiveness. The tension could easily have been cut with a knife when a group of Space Marine librarians approached the dais. The Emperor acknowledged them with a nod, and all present fell silent. Among the group were some of the greatest librarians of the Space Marine legions. They formed a semicircle around the dais to indicate that they spoke as one voice. But it was a young librarian, Epistolary, who spoke for the group. A psyker, he proposed, was like an athlete, a gifted individual whose native talent must be carefully nurtured. Psykers were not innately evil in themselves, but like any tool, could be used for either good or evil purposes. Sorcery, however, was the knowledge of how to wield psychic powers that had to be sought for, even bargaining for, with the foul entities of the warp. No one could be truly sure who or what had benefited in the deal. The librarians proposed that all psykers be strictly educated by the Imperium with the express purpose of using their abilities to serve mankind. This should become an immediate Imperial priority. The practice of psychic sorcery would forever be outlawed as an unforgivable offense against mankind and the worst kind of heresy. The end result of the Council of Nikaea's deliberations was a compromise that offered both the pro- and anti-psyker factions something. But the Council of Nikaea was also the trial of Magnus the Red, for he was accused of sorcery and of introducing sorcerous practices to the Space Marine legions through the institution of the Corps of Librarians. As the evidence of Magnus's continued practice of sorcery became apparent, the Emperor barely contained his wrath as he pronounced judgment on the Primarch of the 1,000 Sons, for he had entrusted his son years before to obey his bidding and forswear the use of such occult practices because of the dangers inherent to the warp. He had entrusted only Magnus with the true secrets of the warp, to which only they remained privy. But now it appears that his son had disobeyed his edicts, and at the very least dabbled in the occult and the forbidden black arts of psychic sorcery. The confrontation between father and son is recorded in the Grimoire Hereticus. The Emperor's judgment at the Council of Nikaea proved severe, largely as a result of his anger at Magnus. The Emperor rejected the librarians' compromise, with the exception of the navigators and the astropaths, who were properly trained, controlled, and sanctioned by the Imperium, and were necessary for its continued existence. The Space Marine legions were no longer to employ psykers within their ranks. He commanded that the Primarchs were to close their librarius departments, and not to indulge in the undoubtable psychic talents of those Astartes who possessed the gift. All existing Space Marine librarians were likewise forbidden to make use of the abilities. The Council's ruling also created a new position amongst the Space Marine legions, the Space Marine Chaplain, to uphold the Imperial truth and help maintain the purity of an Astarte legion's dedication and fidelity to the Emperor's command. The Emperor ordered Magnus to cease the practice of sorcery and incantation in the pursuit of all knowledge related to magic. Magnus, of course, did not like the idea, and he remained bitterly opposed to the decisions made on the council. But in the end, he bent his will to his father the Emperor and agreed to obey. The Edict of Nikaea stood largely for the next 10,000 standard years as the primary imperial policy regarding human psychic mutation. Only the edict against the use of librarians within the ranks of the Space Marines would be reversed as a result of the Horus Heresy, as the terrible civil war made clear to the rulers of the Imperium that Astarte Psykers were essential to combat the powers of the forces of chaos. And those were 40 facts on the Council of Nikaea. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media you guys use. It really helps out the channel when you do so, and it helps us create more videos for you when you share. Now, the council itself is something that we talk about a lot in a lot of the other lore, because this edict really touched a lot of future lore, and I always make the assumption that you guys already know what it is based on context, so we've never actually created a full 40 facts video. Well, we talked about it a little bit during the Horus Heresy series, but that was a really long time ago. I think was when we were under I want to say 50,000 subscribers, so you guys haven't seen it, and you know, by this point that the quality of those videos are pretty bad, so I wouldn't say go back and read it. So we are visiting a lot of the stuff that we touched on before, and looking at it again. And I like this because we can see how, like, Magnus the Red, and he wasn't really a bad guy. If you really break it down, the Emperor created Magnus. His psychic powers were given to him by the Emperor. They might have been pushed farther along because of the actual planet that he arrived in, but at the end of the day, the Emperor had the genetic makeup of each Primarch, and he purposefully did this to Magnus. So, like, when you see the relationship between, like, father-son, and you see how the Emperor was so angry at Magnus for using something that was given to him, it's ridiculous. Recently, I've been watching on YouTube a lot of the HBO documentaries on, like, children with psychopathic tendencies, and it shows the struggle that the parents have with the kid, and you sympathize with those people or with those parents, because of course, like, there is nothing that they can do. No amount of counseling, no amount of, like, parenting is going to be able to make up for the fact that those kids have something going on in their heads. It's something out of the parent's control. The parent didn't have that option to you know, keep the child. There's no way of knowing that he was going to have these tendencies. But it's not the case with the Emperor. I'm not saying that Magnus was psychopathic, but I'm saying that Magnus had the genetic disposition to become a psyker, and the Emperor knew this, and still the Emperor, like, gets angry at Magnus, which is why the hashtag Magnus did nothing wrong goes far beyond just the breaking of the defensive barrier inside the Imperial Palace and all that kind of stuff. Magnus is really the huge victim in this whole scenario, and now he's a demon Primarch, so he's living it up with his hooved feet and his wings, but still, he still is kind of a victim, a pretty bad victim. But yeah, comment down below, guys, if you guys have any suggestions, you guys have any comments. I would love to hear that in the comment section below, and I will talk to you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.